How do you grow a business? How do you do it the right way and do something that's going to be sustainable? Period of time, it's insane like what you can build and the success that I think really anybody can get if they put those two components in, take what you're learning and then run with it and put even more effort than you think it's going to be required and do that consistently over time and just watch yourself rocket ship. I need somebody that's specifically because my books are a hot mess.
So how do you train your team to be effective without you involved in micromanaging?
We all get the same 24 hours. So why is it that some people build so much more with them? I'm Brian Coons, and this is the Builder Nation podcast, where we talk to top performers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries to uncover the architecture of a meaningful and fulfilling life. Let's get into it.
Today, we have my boy Michael Chiodo, the real estate MC, and he is a top producing mortgage strategist and investor in over $600 million in transactions and a reputation for turning no's into yeses on deals. So he's built a scalable lending business. He's trained a long-term assistant to run with precision, and he uses real estate investing to build wealth and freedom. So he's also, by the way, a pilot, a traveler, an endurance athlete who's figured out how to live and work smart. And today we're breaking down all the ways he builds wealth, lifestyle, legacy, and everything else he does in his day. So Michael, explain how the hell somebody builds a lending empire that closes on $600 million in transactions.
Thank you. That's an amazing introduction. I'm very grateful to be here with you. I would say I had really good mentors. I had really two people in my life that kind of took me down the path of how do you grow a business? How do you do it the right way and do something that's going to be sustainable? So if I were to say like, what was my secret sauce? It was, I found somebody that was really good when I started my career. And I literally just followed him around for like 2 years, like show up at the office at 5:30, ask whatever questions I had before he jumped into his meetings, got to watch his schedule, watch his team. And we're still great friends today. We hang out all the time. And while I don't work for him directly anymore, the relationship's still there. So I'd say that's the secret sauce on the real estate empire. And I mean, in the lending field, but I would say really anything that you're doing is like find a good mentor, find good people that have already kind of charted the path that you want to go down. And find a way to add value to them, either work for them or bring them deals or whatever it is that you can come into their life and, show them that you want to learn, you're putting the effort in. And I think a lot of people will pour into you and teach just like I got from my mentor. And I've done that now in 2 different industries. And it's been very successful, I would say, in both. My real estate and development and building there is, still in its infancy, but on the loan side, I credit that all to having great mentors.
That's amazing. What made you confident enough to leave and go out on your own?
God, that's a great question. He's actually his name is Rodrigo. He's actually very encouraging when the time came. I had worked for him for 4 or 5 years at that point, and I just had a really good opportunity. And I talked to him about it. And he's like, dude, honestly, like, that's amazing. I think you should take it. And I was like, I remember I was sitting in his office. I was like, all right, when are they going to jump out and say like, we got you, you're pranked? But it was really, he was super encouraging about it. If I ever had questions, I would still call him. So I think, if I were to replicate that and what were the systems in my head, right? I had, enough savings that I could last for a year without making another dime, which I think is very underrated in, today's flashy Instagram. I always have to look like I'm 10 steps ahead of where I'm at, is just having that cushion. And then also, my business was all independent. I was bringing in my own loans. I had already, got a few rental properties that I had bought and closed on. So I just really felt that was like the natural progression to move on to the next thing and kind of take that next step. And I'm glad I did. It was a very crucial, point in my career. And it was also nice just having that support still from him. And, like I said, to this day, we're still friends and, hang out and get together and still get advice and still, now he's way ahead of me in the investing side. So I'm looking to him of like, hey, what did you do? What was the path? This is what I'm thinking, getting insights and opinion from him.
Yeah, I feel like mentorship, if you find the right guy who just wants to pour into you and you also show that you're a fucking beast in your space, they're gonna continue pouring into you because it's almost the most validating thing they can get is like, right. Yeah, I can teach you exactly what I know and it works. It's validation to them. So if you're a hustler and you're fucking killing it, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world for them to continue pouring into you as much as they can.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I think about it now, right? And I've mentored people and I'm like, oh, when you tell somebody like, hey, this is how I did it. And then you see they run out and do it, and you're like, oh, cool, they got the same, results as me. And now they're crushing it. And that side of it, it's really cool. And it makes you want to just, do more with them, put more into it and keep growing with whoever. Like, I think, A, it's like who's going to listen and who's going to follow the direction, but then B, who's going to put in the work and just go above and beyond. And doing those two things over an extended period of time, it's insane, like what you can build and the success that I think really anybody can get if they put those two components in, take what you're learning and then run with it and put even more effort than you think it's going to be required and do that consistently over time and just watch yourself rocket ship.
Yeah, and it's funny too because it's almost like a filter too. So people, if you're at the operational level that you're at, number one, you're fucking busy, right? So it's like you don't have time to just
Correct.
help everyone out. And number two, like you can tell them, hey, do these things because you're teaching them how to execute. You're not giving them, you're not doing it for them. And so you self-filter, you say, go do this thing. And then it's like if they do it, it's like, all right, cool. Now it's worth to pour a little more time into you.
Right. Well, it's cool. Like I just took on a new loan officer, starting at ground zero. And for me, it's been fun because, I've gotten away from a lot of the basics that got me, to where I'm at in my success. You get this elevated sense of self is what I'd say. Like, oh, I can do everything. Like I'm going to do a construction company and I'm going to do this because I crushed it at loans. Right. And then get brutally smacked in the face of like, I don't know what I'm doing there. So now when I'm like, hey, you need to do these things, you need to, call on realtors, you need to have something to offer. I'm like, damn, I really need to like refine my own stuff because I've gotten away from that. And have just built on, thankfully like good reputation and past clients and, agents that I've worked with for years now. But for me now, it's fun to be like, okay, I can tweak this and I can get back in the grind and, go chase after new agents and just kind of have to not like rebuild from scratch, but it's like, oh, I'm teaching somebody else how to rebuild or how to build themselves up, excuse me. And I'm like, I should be doing these same things because maybe that'll get me to an even higher level. So I think it's always a game, right? And I think that in any business or ventures, like over time, it can get boring. But when it's boring and it's that consistent, thing you have to do, that's what separates people. That's where the success lies is doing the things that you're supposed to do and just doing it over and over. It's not fun having to have a standing meeting every day with my assistant to go through basic stuff. But by doing that and going through it, we never let anything slip through the cracks because that boring basic meeting covers all of the big ticket items and then make sure that all the big ticket items line up to what our goals are and nothing's getting dropped between because we're not seeing each other, we're not talking for weeks and letting stuff fall.
There's a lot of questions that I had there. I want to take it down that rabbit hole though of your assistant, right? So from a tactical standpoint, you hired an assistant that you've had for a very long time. Take me through if somebody like so many people, right? They know they need to hire the executive assistant. How do you
Right.
hire an executive assistant and actually train them?
Yeah, I think that took me a lot of trial and error. And like on the personal side, it was very challenging to go through the mistakes and be like, oh, shoot, I hired the wrong person. Let me just try to out train them and give them extra attention and all of this stuff. But then, not realizing like everybody says, hire slow, fire fast. And I kind of went the opposite. And I was like, oh, this person's great. They're amazing. Their resume looks good. Let me hire them. And then I took forever to fire them. So I'd say from a tactical standpoint is, don't let it just ride. If something's not working, take really immediate and hard corrective action. But what I would have done differently in the beginning is set a standard right out of the get-go. These are my expectations of you. This is when I expect you to return phone calls. This is how I expect you to return emails. These are the tasks that are non-negotiables for you to get done today. This is a competency that you have to have and really have like a strategy book before you even make your first hire. And I think a lot of people get to this, like, I'm super busy, so let me just hire somebody because that's going to solve my problem. And it's actually the opposite because if you hire somebody, you're going to have to take a step back in order to train them and put those proper systems and processes and procedures in. So if you're not willing to sacrifice that, and this was a mistake that, I made many of times where I'm like, oh, I'm super busy. Let me just hire somebody and throw all the shit at them. And so now what I've done is I'm like, okay, what is the thing that I want to take off of my plate? The most recent one was bookkeeping. And so I was like, okay, I need somebody that's specifically, because my books are a hot mess. That's my one advice to anybody that's starting a business, whatever it is out of the gate, have super clean books, do everything the right way, because you can do it on a smaller scale. And I was going back like months trying to figure out like, oh, what was that thing I swiped my card for at Home Depot and which project was it for? And it was absolute chaos. So I wanted to offload that entirely off of my plate. So I'm like, here's all the things that I do regarding bookkeeping. That's mortgage payments, which projects charges are associated to. I want to have clean books every week where I can look at it and see what money did we bring in, what money went out. So I made this list of all these tasks that I'm currently doing or that I know need to get done. And I made that into a playbook. So when I hired this person, before I hired them, I said, hey, here's the expectations. I want all of these things done perfectly or done this way or whatever, as much detail as you can give them, right? And I said, is this something you're capable of? And what is the evidence that you've done this before, which I think is very important for a lot of positions, is if you're hiring somebody to take it off your plate, they need to demonstrate, that they've already done this at a high level or at the level that you expect them to. And they've ran with that independent. Like you're not having to constantly go back in and double check work and then pick it back up off of your plate. I think those are super critical pieces of just having it really dialed in and written out of what you expect. Because then as you're going through it too, you're like, oh, wow, I don't really want that. Or shoot, I didn't think about this. Let me add that in there. And that has been super helpful for me. And I think has led to a lot of the success that I've had within a team environment is just spelling out exactly what everybody's expected to do and making sure that they can do that.
Interesting. So at what point do you think is the right time for somebody to hire an assistant?
So we had a standard in lending. It was like every 5 transactions, you would get a support person. So I think that it varies by industry. What I would say, and I think it also varies on the service level that you want to deliver, right? So in my industry, let's say on a broker side, you may find somebody that's a little bit cheaper because all they're doing is just taking your information and throwing it over to a broker. And then the other lender has to do it, originate it, service is generally lacking, mistakes are made. That's what you're getting and that's what you're paying for. For me, I run a really high touch, high customer service focused business. So I bring on support people sooner. And yes, that comes out of my compensation, but I do that so that I can continue to deliver a really good product. And my philosophy is that if I'm continuing to elevate the service, elevate the standard, the bar, whatever you want to call it, that I'm going to bring in more customers because I'm going to get more referrals. So for a business owner, I don't know that you have like a clear, or let's say somebody that's, a flipper or a developer. I don't know that there's a clear set number there. But what I would say is when your service levels and your standards start to dip because you're not able to take care of the things you need to, you should immediately find somebody, or even before you get to that point of breaking, have somebody that's lined up so that you don't disrupt your service.
Got it. And how do you, you kind of mentioned it and alluded to it a little bit. How do you train your team? So how do you train your team to be effective without you involved in micromanaging?
So I'm piloting a new thing. So I don't have a stamp of I've done this 50 times yet, but we just signed up for it's like Tranual, and you go in and as you're going through, like, let's say I want to teach somebody, hey, how would I take a 1003, which is our loan application, if a client doesn't want to do it on the online application? So it records my screen, it records me. And then in this case, I did it on a call with a client over Zoom. So now I have the audio transcript as well. So that will go into our SOP book of, how do you pre-approve a client? So that's, step 1, get the application. So when somebody clicks into there, they see our team standard up. This is what you're saying. This is what you're telling the client. This is how you're closing out the call. And then these are the next steps. And then once they've completed the application, they go on to the next, step in this process. But as a general, for like a general business, or let's say somebody that's, again, developer, or, even somebody that's, let's say, a homeowner and is looking to build an ADU in their backyard, but wants to keep this, build one, move on, continue to build a portfolio. I think anything you do more than once should be documented so you can hand it off to somebody. And that's the goal that I have with Tranual, however you say it, is if I'm reviewing somebody's credit more than one time, that's a standard task and procedure for me, right? So I can communicate, this is how I do it. This is our team standards. And now when I hire two more assistants, I don't need to sit with each of them to go through, this is how I review credit. I say, hey, here's the training modules. I need you to watch all of these in the first 3 weeks of working here. And if you don't understand something once you've watched it, then ask me. And that just completely, like 90% of questions are going to get answered in these modules. So that even if, let's say, somebody comes on, like I was saying, hire slow, fire fast. If somebody comes on, I'm like, shit, I made a mistake. This is not the right person. I can say, hey, no problem. I didn't spend very much time training them. They're not the right fit. We're going to bring on another person. And that person now can spend the time going through and reviewing all of our team standards. So I think it's very important. And that's a more expensive way. Before that, we were doing it through Google Drive. So we just had a team folder. I would open up, how to review a credit report. I would put snippets, or I would do a Loom video that was into there, type out the explanation. But now with AI, there's a lot of programs that literally just follow your screen, follow what you're doing. You're talking to you're talking to the screen, telling you what you're doing, and then that all translates and transcribes into a process. So I think with technology, it's going to improve. But what I would say is the most important thing is just document what you expect and then train your team to look there before going to use, so that way you're not bogged down with a bunch of questions.
Okay, that makes sense. And so as a business owner, what are the first and last tasks that you delegate and why?
Hey guys, if you're a business owner, high income earner, or investor who's been thinking about getting into real estate development but don't have the time to manage the process, this is for you. My company partners with people like you to help unlock the potential of your properties or even source and manage new small scale development projects. We manage hundreds of ADUs and infill development projects across Southern California, and our team knows how to simplify the process so you can benefit from the upside without managing contractors, permits, or design headaches. Whether you want to develop your own property, explore ways to offset taxes, or just learn how the development model works, head to thebuildernation.com/partner. That's thebuildernation.com/partner, and see how we can help you build more with the same 24 hours. Now back to the show.
Sales, I have not delegated. So I love being a salesperson. I love putting the deal together. So for example, in growing all of the business ventures, we have an Airbnb management company. And I personally love talking with people that are, owners of a house that they're thinking of converting, or that, one of my clients that's an investor, they're looking at buying an Airbnb. I like selling them into that business. I'm like, hey, these are all the things we're going to do. These are the problems it's going to solve. So I personally get a ton of joy out of that. My partner on that, it absolutely doesn't want to do any of that. We were talking, he's like, well, I need to get the systems, and I need to get this. I'm like, yeah, but I need to get like what we're selling. So what are we offering, right? And he's like, I didn't even think about that. So for me, my personal one is I don't delegate sales. That's always my forte and what I love doing. The first thing that I delegate is just like all the paperwork and admin and stuff. Like, I don't want to get files organized, look through bank statements. So I think for every industry, it's different. But as a macro level, I would say is like, find what brings you joy. And you've read Buy Back Your Time, I think, from Dan Martell. It's like, I'm not trying to eliminate everything in my business. I want to just keep the things that give me energy and are critical parts. So, bringing in business, bringing in revenue is a critical part for our businesses and for what I do. So that's where I get energy from, and it's critical. So I keep that. Everything else in one way, shape, or form, I look to delegate or to add automation or something that makes it more efficient so I can spend more time with people and on the phone.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you alluded to it once or twice, but I remember at one point you had a content creation studio. You've mentioned construction. So it sounds like you've had several businesses that you've actually quit. So like, explain the thought process behind quitting multiple businesses and if that was a failure or not.
I mean, crash, sure, you can call it a failure. I think it's also, so I had this, like, I would say, not gap year, but maybe 2 gap years where I was like, oh, I've crushed it at loans. I hit like my loan goals. Like, I'd set some pretty audacious ones when I started. And then I hit them all and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm bored. And I'm like, well, I'm smart. I can figure this out. I can do all this stuff. Right. And so I did a construction company. I did a content studio. I did a property management company. There's probably 1 or 2 other ones in there that were just like absolute like dumb ideas. I know where I was thinking. And so, yeah, I guess, I think the deciding factor for me was it took away from the thing that I enjoyed doing, which was loans and building real estate. And I was losing money on it. So when I put those two together, I'm like, I need to just go back to doing what I love and focusing more on finding ways to not make it boring. So investing was one of them, right? So instead of me trying to invest in every asset class, I was like, I enjoy doing Airbnbs. I enjoy putting a really high quality house together, doing a really good service for the guests that are staying there. So why don't I go do bigger projects there and more luxury instead of just picking off a bunch of random stuff? On the lending side, that's really where my like investor loans and like all of those relationships came from, was because conventional loans, FHA, first time home buyers, I love serving them. That's like a passion for me. It fires me up. It gets me super excited. But the mundane, like everybody fits into the box. That's what you're shooting for. You package the loan, you sell it, it's all the same. I wanted to add in something that like got me excited. And that's where, a lot of the investor loans where it's like, you're figuring out, how do we make this property work? How do we help somebody develop, an ADU in their backyard, or fix and flip this and add 3 more units, or everyone's a unique situation. And so I enjoy that and it keeps me on my toes. And I really like that. So I just turned back into what I knew and then found different ways to make it fun and re-engaging for myself.
Okay, so how, you're using real estate investing, you're saying, as a way to build wealth. So, how are you using real estate to actually build wealth?
I'd say there's twofold. So general high level, I originate loans. That's my active income. That's where, I started, and that was what kind of gave me my foundation. From there, then I would say, okay, I have this, surplus of money that I'm making from my cost of living. What do I do with that? And that was where I started to build wealth through real estate, because, I personally, it's like I've looked at stocks, I've looked at all these other alternative investments. The most sure way to become wealthy and financially free that I believe anybody can do is through real estate. So when I took that, I said, okay, I'm going to focus on learning all aspects of that realm. So that was where I learned lending. I learned, how do people transact and sell real estate as agents, brokers? What are the tax advantages? How do you get leverage? And I took all that and combined it into saying, okay, for me, building wealth means buying a property that is typically undervalued, putting some type of renovations or change the zoning or do something to increase value, and then either hold on to that for long term, pay down the debt on it, collect rent, or flip that and then take that cash and do the same thing over with something that I am going to hold long term. So for me, the ultimate wealth building strategy in real estate is just continue to acquire as much of it as possible and hold on to it for as long as possible with somebody else paying down that note.
Okay. And so you're doing it you're doing it more so for tax purposes than anything else, right? Because you're a very high income earner and you're using the real estate to offset taxes.
Yeah, I think that there's a two-prong approach. And then my disclaimer on all this is like, check with your CPA. I have a CPA, enrolled agent, and a tax attorney, because I know enough to be dangerous and I read all this stuff online. I ask chat, but yes, it is also a tax strategy. So there are several loopholes. The most common one that I see my personal forensic clients using is the short-term rental loophole. So great depreciation that you can then roll over onto active income if you meet the requirements and you're running the Airbnbs and things like that. I think it's a very easy setup now with all the technology and automation to qualify for that. So I think that is one of, if you're asking for like a wealth building strategy, taking your high earning income job and then buying short-term rentals and then using the depreciation and all of the other tax strategies surrounding that to offset as much of your income that you're earning from your job as possible, I think is one of the best ways right now to not only build wealth, but then save on taxes, which then you can take that money and rinse and repeat it back into more properties, which then keeps this snowball going.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. And it's not always like just dumping in as much money as possible, right? It's still strategic.
Right.
So in order to do that, you still want leverage. You still want to put leverage on these deals. So obviously being a lender, you see a shit ton of these deals come across your desk every single day. And you're actually like one of my go-to people for development and ADUs because you have so many products that are available that actually make sense for it. So can you explain to me kind of, how does lending work for a single family home with ADUs?
Right. It varies based on how they're developed, would be like a big broad answer, right? And then if we dive into the nitty gritty of it, a lot of the ADUs and the standards that the jurisdiction, so state, city, county, whoever's guiding that, a lot of those are now in the realm of being actual units. They've got individual addresses, separate utilities, separate access. They're not attached to the primary structure. So a lot of the deals that we're doing, they're actually being financed as multi-units. So, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and you're getting really competitive financing on it. I mean, you're qualifying for Fannie Freddie type products. I've done FHA loans, more somebody's done an ADU, and then just traditional, hard money lenders, construction lenders are really liking the ADU play because it's an in-demand product, right? So, and it's why I say that it's multiple people want this product. So let's say you take somebody that just graduated college, they've been saving, they have good reserves, a good job, good credit. They're taking that and buying a house, but now they want rental income to help offset their mortgage. So they're a end user buyer of the ADU, right? That's a smart financial play. There's tons of financing available for them. Then you take the developer aspect of it, and a developer is able to buy a single family property that maybe needs a little bit of work and then stick a few units in the back as well. So now they're able to also make a good return and a good profit on their money. So a lot of developers are now going after the ADU plays. And then globally within the cities and states is you have the government agencies, you have housing authorities, you have all these other people that want to create housing in densely populated areas. And so now their solution to that is to loosen up on regulations, make it easier to get permits, offer standardized, floor plans that somebody can just get and build. There's all these different ways that they're getting creative of how they go about it too. And then now kind of the last people, in my opinion, to catch up is all of the, traditional lenders. So the government agencies, Fannie, Freddie, the bigger banks, now they're all seeing the demand from, end buyers of, somebody buying their first house with an ADU. They're seeing the developers put out really good and then they're seeing the, government agencies and everybody pushing for more affordable housing. So now all of the lending standards are also now catching up and loosening up to make more products available, which in turn creates more affordability from a lending perspective as well.
Okay. And so if somebody's building multiple ADUs, what is the number one thing they need to know when they hit 5 or more units?
Oh, that's a great question, especially like in, Southern California and like really densely populated areas. They're allowing you to build, let's say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ADUs on a single family lot. But that drastically changes your financing. So once you go over 4 units, you go into commercial financing. So there's a room between like, let's say 5 units and 10 that's still similar to residential. After 10, totally and truly commercial. Financing requirements are totally different. It's more seasoned investors, more liquidity is required, lower loan to value. Like that's just a whole nother animal. For somebody that's looking to, let's say, start at ground zero and build wealth, the most effective way to do that is to buy a single family house and build up to 3 additional units, on that property so that it stays below fourplex. At 4 units or below, because you can qualify now for 5% down on owner occupied financing. There's tons of lenders doing it. There's lots of other comparable properties for the most part of somebody that's done that before. So it's easy on the appraiser. And it's a safe product for somebody to say, hey, I want to jump into being a landlord, but I want to have my hands on it and I want to still know what's going on. Because usually they're living in the front house and now they have 3 renters in the back house. And in my opinion, the way to supercharge your wealth is then you take those 3 units and then you turn them into short or medium term rentals because you're already on site. You can manage that a lot better. And then now not only do you get the, long-term rental, sure, you build some wealth there because you're building more units, and you collect, minimal profit usually in the first few years. But if you do the short-term route, you get that same build and equity and all of that, but now you get more cash flow because you're on a short-term tenant property. And then on top of that, now you get to qualify for all the tax incentives for short-term rentals. So I think that's the ultimate play if you can do it, because somebody can buy a single family house with 3 to 3.5% down. I can get them a grant typically to buy that first single family house. Then they go through the permitting process. Once they have permits, we can get them a traditional conventional loan to build the units. And then once all of that is said and done, they refinance and they get all their, typically can get all of their costs and even a little bit more because they've made so much value through building, through, permitting, all of that somebody else doesn't want to do. Now they have this awesome asset, 3 brand new units. They're living in one, renting out the other 3, and it's just a cash cow, and they can rinse and repeat that every year.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, man. So you kind of mentioned it, that the 1 to 4 is so much easier to lend on. Why do you think that is? Why do you think lending on 4 or less, or certain products work better than others?
I think it's just the leverage. So it's like, trying to think of the right way to explain this. It's like, you say like, so let's take 2020 through 2022, right? Everything was booming. The real estate's on fire. Everything is skyrocketing in value, right? It's all because of lending that happened. Rates got super low, leverage, everything was all lending centric, right? And now you're in a slower part of real estate. Why is it slower? It's because rates are higher, lending tightened up, and access to capital is harder. So when I take that and you apply that to why do single families with these ADU builds work and why are they so, in my opinion, the best way to build wealth is because you have easy access to capital. You have traditional lending, you have easy guidelines. Most people can qualify. FHA loans, you can have super low credit scores, all kinds of banged up credit, and you can still qualify and do this wealth building strategy, right? And so with that, you have easy access, and that means that there's a lot of buyers that are going to come in and pick up these properties. So as a developer, you could build it and sell it to, you could sell a fourplex to a family that's looking to owner occupy one and rent out the rest. If you're a first time home buyer and you're okay putting in that sweat equity, then you can buy something that's a single family, go through the year or 2 process to develop it, and build that wealth for yourself and sell it and rinse and repeat, or move out of the first house by then because you've been there for 12 months. So I think the access to capital and cheap capital, it allows you to do more than somebody trying to go buy a 5 unit or a 10 unit and figure out how to do all that. You can start with this baby step and get your feet wet and understand how real estate works in such a cheap way, in my opinion, compared to trying to do something like, the 5+ or 10, 20 unit apartments and things like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned the other day that just because interest rates are higher doesn't mean that people stop lending. So can you
Correct.
explain like where does that money go?
That money, so what we've seen is a lot of that money has now funneled into seconds, into HELOCs. We've got closed end seconds. We've got debt consolidation seconds. It's like this whole mountain of industry just formed because people now have, I forget every, month the statistic changes, but there is a healthy portion of mortgages, a large portion that is sub 4%, let's call it, right? So when you're looking at those people, they're now building all this equity. They may have credit card debts. They may want to go buy a second house. They may want to start investing. All of that money that was normally funneled through the first mortgage market, these investors are now saying, well, how do we tap into that market? How do we serve that client and generate more business? And so you've just seen this explosion on the seconds. And what I'm doing with a lot of clients to help them build wealth is say, okay, if you love your house right now, you love your low interest rate and your manageable payment, what if we put a second on there? And now you took that second and you went and bought a property as a rental. And then you do the same play where you're going through permitting, you going through the city, all of that to get approval to build, let's say, another 1 unit, 2 units, or 3 units. Do that in the back of a single family house. And now you haven't changed your payment. You still have your low monthly payment. You've now bought yourself an asset that's a 4 unit asset just off of the equity that you already had in your property. And now they start that wealth building journey. And the funny thing is the people that have done that once are like racing back to do it again. I've gotten the most referrals from them. like they're just on a tear to share that success. And so I'm just surprised that more people aren't doing that, and more people aren't tapping into experts like you, where they can go buy that single family. They can work with you and your team to figure out how to extrapolate the value by developing. And I think in your case is like they can even hire you to, manage that process, right? So you have all these people that are sitting on all this untapped wealth that, there's so many people now that can help them. And I just don't get why they're not. And the ones that, do sit down and listen and they do, and they're like, okay, I see the vision. As soon as they're done with the first one, they're like, okay, what if I took my 401k and I took some money from there? What if we refinance the one that we just finished and we'll use the same money? Now we can do 2 projects. I'm like, perfect, let's do it. Because they're seeing real tangible results. And I think that goes back to like, looping back and circling on the, where people are going is where the demand is now shifting into this model. And so when people see the success, they're going to build more of it. And now you have this snowball of like, okay, mom and pop took their money out of, their HELOC. They built a 4-unit. They saw it was successful. They're going to do it again. So now there's more of these properties. There's more lending on it. And so now there's more investors that are getting involved because they want a piece of that market. And you have that cycle that now this asset class just explodes because there's so many people that are seeing success from it. And on the actual like humanity side of it, outside of originating mortgages for profit and all these investors, is like you're providing good quality new housing in markets that are oversaturated and rents have skyrocketed. So you're now giving people alternatives to having to go live in, a 50-year-old house because that's all that they can afford. You're giving them the ability to move into these units that are designed for today's living and give them a really good quality product at an affordable price. To me, that checks all of my boxes of things I want to be involved in. It's like, yes, I want to originate and have a good life by my work that I do. Yes, I want to help other people build wealth by showing them the techniques, tactics, ways of doing it. And then like, yeah, it's awesome to see one of my clients like standing outside of their finished product, but like, their hands held high and super excited. And then now they're, the trickle down is now somebody's renting a really nice unit for a very affordable price. So to me, like it hits all of them, makes me super excited to get to do what I'm doing.
That's amazing. So one last question for you, not related to lending. So if you lost everything tomorrow except the values that you hold, what value would be your North Star and why?
That's a really good question. I would say resilience would definitely be key in there. I would want to pick that and hard work, overachiever. I have to pick 2. But I think now, like honestly, seeing like I have this path that I thought I was going to go down, right? And like then I come on to, podcasts and I read and I see what's going on. And I'm like, there's so much opportunity if I had to start over of just like quickly stacking the bricks. And I think the ADU play, and I think, Builder Nation, the mindset, right? Of like, how do you build something that is building wealth, building good communities, like all of those things you can now do in a much more effective way. Like anybody can come in and be a developer, in my opinion, because there's so many programs out there to get you into your first home. So you get into your first home, and then you start stacking on ADUs. And that's exactly how I would do it again. If I had to start from zero, I would get a job that I could qualify for a loan. I would buy a single family house. I would work up the permits, work up the permitting process, develop it, and then I'd probably sell it and rinse and repeat the process. But the North Star and the value for that would just be like, put my head down, keep tracking resilient, and then work hard, because that's going to like, we can talk about concepts all day long, right? But it takes somebody that goes out there and finds the property, somebody that, is going to go hound the city for, 6, 9, 12 months to get their stuff done. When you get kicked in the teeth, you're just going to be like, okay, cool. Like today's lesson, let's jump back into it. So I think resilience is for sure the like one, but that has to be paired with hard work. Otherwise it doesn't make a difference.
That's a great answer. All right. So if people want to get a hold of you, if they have loans, if they want to, see what you got going on with your community side, where can they get a hold of you?
All of my socials are the Real Estate MC. I would say I'm most active on Instagram. Working on YouTube, that's like the next one to crack for me. But yeah, I post all the time on the Real Estate MC on Instagram, and you can just Google my name. My website's the same thing. And I would say that one thing I always tell people is like, I love figuring out and strategizing. So if you're thinking about doing this, or like you just want a basic roadmap, like slide in my DMs, give me a call, shoot me an email. Cause I love this. And it's like, it's something that I have found a renewed interest in my work that I've done for 15 years that is like bored and stale. So I love being able to like actively engage and share all this information and then get loans out of it too. Because it gives me that like amazing feedback loop and makes me happy.
Man, this is all right. I appreciate it. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Michael, the real estate MC Chiodo. And we will see you guys in the next episode.
That's it for this episode of the Build a Nation podcast. If it gave you something to think about, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's leveling up. Until next time, keep building.